morning and afternoon, and welcome to the Education Elements, the Instructional Leadership Gap webinar. I'm excited to lead this panel discussion this afternoon. I do want to introduce myself. I am Layla Newland. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager for the Professional Education Services Unit here at Education Elements. I would like for our audience to start introducing themselves in the chat. It's always really helpful for me and the panelists that I'm working with to know who we have with us as we go through our conversation so that we can tailor examples and what we share to who we have in the room with us today. So to start off, if you can share your name, your role, the district, and what instructional leadership means to you. So I'm going to pause there for about 30 seconds, just as folks get settled into the room. But as you enter, if you can share your name, your role, the district in which you serve, and what instructional leadership means to you. Okay. So I did just want to quickly introduce Education Elements as well for those who aren't familiar with our team. We have been supporting school and district leaders for about 14 years now, working in over 2,000 schools and districts. And really what we are focused on is making sure that when our schools grow, our people grow. So we provide a range of consulting services and support for school and district leaders. One of those areas of support is focused on instructional leadership, which is what brings us here today. So I want to share a little bit of background on why we at Education Elements believe that it's important to have this conversation in April 2024, and why our panelists are here with us today. So we know that we are in a very important moment of time in which we really need to think deeply about how we're supporting student learning. That isn't to say that hasn't been our purpose all along, but when we look at the hard, standardized academic outcomes, as well as some of those other formative outcomes and formative assessments in our schools, we continue to see a trend where our students need more targeted, tailored, differentiated, tiered support. Well, what does that mean for our teachers and our building leaders? It means that they need to have a really deep understanding of best instructional practices, and that our building leaders need to really be laser focused on their instructional leadership. Over the past few years, because of COVID, and as we put building leaders in place, because we saw record numbers resign and retire, what we saw was a shift and a focus on school management. Well, because our building leaders have been focused on school management and came into the role with an emphasis on school management, and our students' learning needs are ever more in need of tailored and differentiated instruction, we're at this moment in time where we really need to talk through how do we support our building leadership to be the instructional leaders that we know they are capable of being. And so what we want to do today is really center the conversation around what our panelists are doing in their individual districts to support instructional leadership and what it means to them. Additional research and data points that I want to emphasize about how important our instructional leaders are. So research over the past 15, 20 years on looking at school leadership and its influence on student outcomes shows time and time again, one, that strong instructional leadership and focus is correlated to strong student outcomes. And two, and perhaps just as important at this particular moment in time, is teacher retention. So we see better workplace culture and environment when we have building leaders who are focused on instructional leadership. And so I did want to just define what I mean by that and what does it look like before we dive into our panel discussion. So to be a strong instructional leader, one thing that I think about is making sure that our leaders are creating safe and collaborative learning environments. Strong instructional leaders also tend to emphasize and model monitoring and evaluating the impact of the focus work. So as building leaders, they set the focus for their staff, but then they're modeling how we're focused on whatever key areas. So if we're focused on literacy, for example, those instructional leaders continue to model and evaluate how are we driving toward the outcomes that we want to see. And those outcomes may not just be standardized test scores. It can be student achievement. It can be student engagement. There's a range of outcomes that we're looking at, right? Attendance rates. And so when we see strong instructional leaders, they're coming back to that data over and over again. And then the other attribute that we tend to see in strong instructional leadership is that focus on continuous improvement. So related to my second point, but a distinct attribute where they're explicitly talking about what it means to continuously improve as individuals and as a collective, as a school. So I'm so excited to be joined by our panelists today. What I would like to do is have each of our panelists share a little bit about the district in which they serve and their role and their perspective on what strong instructional leadership looks like. And then we're going to dive into our panel. So I want to start with Jerry Boyd, Superintendent of Washington County, Tennessee Schools, and then Portia Slaughter, for Chief Academic Officer from Harrisburg City, Pennsylvania School District. And finally, Sean Bolson, Superintendent of Hartford County, Maryland Public Schools. And before you all introduce yourselves, I do just want to say thank you for donating your time this morning, afternoon. I understand how busy your schedules are, and I know that our audience appreciates your time as well. Jerry?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the superintendent of Washington County Schools located in Northeast Tennessee. We're a county district. We serve around 8,000 students through 14 schools. Our structure, our elementary structure is K through 8, and then we have 2 comprehensive non-12 high schools, an alternative school, and then a university partnership, a laboratory school with the local university. We have our share being a rural area mostly. We have our share of poverty and the challenges of being under-resourced by our families and our students in a lot of ways. But overall, we have a very supportive community and have a long history of support for education in our county. I've been here 3 years. I was previously a superintendent in another part of Tennessee, 8 years in that role. So I've been a Tennessee superintendent now. This is finishing my 11th year as a superintendent and my 29th year as a public educator. We've been working in this case, with Ed Elements. I had a partnership previously in my former district. And when I came here, I was looking for ways to improve our instructional leadership approach, with our principals, our assistant principals, our teacher leaders. So we really have used strong partnerships to help focus the support that our principals must provide every day for their teachers and in setting that collaborative culture and that vision. So that's really been a lot of our focus, is to ensure we create conditions by which our teachers can excel and strive. And if they do, of course, our main focus is on our students striving and excelling. So just providing that supportive culture, that clear vision, and doing that in a way that is a team effort and collaborative is something that we've really been shifting in this district from a very top-down decision-making district to one that's a lot more bottom up and collaborative, and really focusing on support, and coaching, and a lot of listening, and bringing people together to share best practices.
Thank you, Jerry. Portia?
Great afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for inviting me to this awesome opportunity. I always love the opportunity to share the narrative of our school district. I am Dr. Portia Slaughter, the Chief Academic Officer in the Harrisburg City School District. We are in the capital of Pennsylvania. Our district is considered an urban school district. We have just a little over 6,000 scholars between 11 brick and mortar buildings. We do have one HVLA or virtual program which supports our schools. In thinking about the work around instructional leadership, one of the unique things about our district is we are under what's called court-appointed receivership. In Harrisburg City School District was identified as a district needing moderate to mild recovery back in 2014. And so we have shifted from that just because of the continuation of trying to implement continuous improvement and make changes in our district, not only financially, but academically for our scholars so that we can improve outcomes for our families. Unfortunately, a lot of challenges that we deal with in the urban district, even though now everyone probably faces human capital challenges, but just the continuous turnover previously or prior to COVID really kept us in a space where continuous improvement became a challenge in that we were constantly seeing ourselves having to restart initiatives or strategies, retrain, those types of things. The unfortunate part of that is that it shifted us from a space of recovery to now being under court-appointed receivership. And so what that means is that we do have a court-appointed receiver that acts in essence of our school board and is responsible for training our school board to retake over, as well as having a chief recovery officer, which is also appointed by our state education agency that supports our superintendent. So with that being said, we have a recovery plan, which really helps us to center around what it means for continuous improvement, the feedback that we've received in terms of how do we change the narrative and development of our school leaders and being more instructional really came off the hands of the feedback that we've received going through the recovery process and identifying what those needs are. Instructional leadership became one of the areas in the forefront for us to be able to focus on. Some of the things that we definitely want to do is ensure that we have created, number one, a safe space. Leela, you mentioned that in terms of what happens in buildings, and we're trying to ensure that the conditions we set here at the district office create a safe space for our building leaders in the development of them into instructional leaders. It's really important that they feel comfortable saying like, hey, I'm not really sure, I don't really know about this, so that we can ensure that our coaching and our guidance and the things that we're doing around this area are really benefiting them specifically around their need. Really trying to root in equity of instruction and what that means for access, not only for our scholars, but also our teachers, and then ultimately our building leaders, so that they have what they need in order to give teachers what they need, so that ultimately our scholars can get what they need.
Thanks, Portia. Sean?
Right. Hi, Sean Bolson, Superintendent at Hartford County Schools, Northeast Maryland. We're a district of 38,000 students, 55 schools. I'm in my 11th year as superintendent, 6 here in Hartford, and then I served for 5 years as a superintendent in Wilson, North Carolina. I had 2 years working at the UNC system. I was previously a high school principal in Maryland, and I started my career as an ESOL teacher, so I've kind of been all over the map. I think many great things going on with instructional leadership here. I think we've all had to lean into that differently, over the last few years, dealing with the changes that we've seen in our students and some of the catch up we needed to do. For me, there's been a bit of a journey. I'll probably come back to this in later questions, but the one of the biggest things for me was leaning first into literacy instruction. And now, in fact, just in the last year, we've really turned the corner to instructional leadership that's really having an impact on all teachers. And I can talk about that a little bit. But some other things that are central to me around leadership for instruction is, ensuring great teacher prep. And I heard Jerry mention a laboratory school. In fact, I just came from a visit this morning. Our laboratory school is in its first year, and it's just an amazing experience. So I'd love to talk more about that in a little bit. So that, teacher prep is a key element, and the role that I think school systems are increasingly playing in the teacher prep space is something that's really essential for instructional leadership, making sure our candidates come in with a really great start. But then, the other things that I think of when I think of instructional leadership is, again, the word we've heard from the others, support for teachers. But one of the biggest keys, when I think about supporting my schools and supporting my school leaders, one of the things I have to help them get is great data, because we all talk about data. In fact, many of our conversations start with data, but sometimes it's hard. It's a lot of work for them to access that. And so work we've done about ensuring our schools have the data they need to make good instructional decisions, I think, is really a key element also. So hope we get to explore all these a little bit.
Thank you, Sean. So on that, you all started to define instructional leadership. Sean, can I start with you? And we're really going to have a dialogue. And audience, please ask follow-up questions in the chat. I'm here to monitor the chat. We want this conversation to serve our audience. We want to make sure that we answer any questions that you came to this discussion with in mind. So Sean, to kick us off, what does instructional excellence mean to you? And how are you thinking about setting those expectations as the superintendent of the district?
Well, I think the first move is setting a really high level target. And so one of the first things I did when I arrived, it was within the first year, the listen and learn tour, you learn what the district needs, you get a sense of where the strengths are. One of the things I learned during that listening tour was that our early grades literacy curriculum was not very strong. So I knew I had to lean into that. So I think understanding, where everyone is one of the first key things you have to do. For me, I'm going to be looking at outcomes. And so the next thing was to find out, what are we measuring and how are we ensuring that, we're getting the results we're looking for in those measurements? And for that matter, are we even measuring the right things so we know? And so creating an accountability model where we can define what we're looking for, creating goals. Those are all things that happened early on. And my folks have been trying to find new strategies to deliver on all of those since the beginning. A lot of it has to do with looking at that experience of teachers in the classroom. We spend a lot of time in buildings, and I have different folks who are doing this, observing instruction, giving feedback on instruction, but learning about instruction for ourselves. When I take my leadership team in, on some level, I'm not looking as much at what's happening in the school as I'm looking at what my team is seeing and what they're discussing and what they're focusing on, so that if I need to make adjustments there to say, we really need to be looking this way. So I use that as actually to help strengthen my team when we go in. Not, I think the principals all feel like, we're there to pick on them, which isn't always the case. We need to make sure we have a team with some shared goals and some shared beliefs about what instructional leadership looks like. But also now, particularly when we've seen what's going on with, for example, the reading wars. I've been right in the middle of that here in Harford County, because there's a lot of thinking about how we should be teaching reading. And so you hear about the science of reading. And in fact, what we've leaned into in the last year is more what they're calling kind of the science of instruction. We're focused on Rosenshine's principles in action, and that's what's centering our instructional leadership, which is kind of going out to all of our teachers, because there are strategies in there that bring people back to what should be happening in every type of classroom. And so we're trying to create that common language around what great instruction looks like. So between goal setting, between providing the data people need to hit those goals, or to monitor whether they're hitting those goals, and then having the shared discussion so you have the shared language, and then you need to be looking at how much your time you spend focusing on instruction, because it's so easy to get drawn away to all the management things. And so ensuring we have people who are constantly focused on that, ensuring that there's a fair amount of my time staying focused on that so I can stay up to date. So we really look at this through a lot of lenses.
Jerry, I saw you nodding your head as Sean was talking. I'm curious, what resonates with you, and how would you augment this for what you're doing in Washington County and how you're thinking about this?
Well, the one statement Sean made about the walkthroughs and being in schools, and really it's about that, trying to get that alignment and coherence of vision with your team that's involved in supporting principals and teachers. You know, you have to start there as far as your visioning. So that certainly resonated with me. And then it's, the other statement Sean made about data. There's a lot of data, and it's easy to get distracted with data that might not be very important as far as what you're trying to accomplish and the focus. So trying to identify those data points that are the most important, and keeping everybody on task as far as, we need to stay on point with this, because have those conversations of the why. But really it's just about those continuous conversations and feedback loop, both with your team, as far as if there's a district leadership team involved, and then supporting principals and having those conversations, because there is a lot of room for growth for all of us. But some principals have different strengths, and not all of them, their strength in the beginning may not be instructional leadership, and you have to support them as much as you do your classroom teachers, and listen to what their needs are, and meet them with where they at with their needs, to get them to the level you need. So just being frequent feedback cycles, and critical conversations, debriefings, as far as when you walk through, listening to what you hear your principals saying, and then maybe your teacher leaders, as you pull them into these walkthroughs as well, and what they're seeing, and what kind of feedback or questions they have. It's really about trying to build that coherent vision from the classroom all the way up to the district. And then once you do that, you really can accomplish a lot, in keeping the focus on student learning. Instruction, of course, is the mechanism, but we always try to make sure our focus includes evaluation of student work. And so we really see is what we're doing as teachers, and what the instructional strategies are, is it resulting in the kind of outcomes as we see through the student work, aligned to our academic standards. So it's just a continuous loop of feedback and collaboration.
Portia, I saw you take yourself off mute.
Yes, so exciting. Both what Sean and Jerry said in spaces resonated with me. Really, starting from when setting the conditions mean that we're modeling what we expect from the district level, right? And so some of the things that we've had to do was ensure that we can level set across all spaces and center in around the same understanding. And so one of the key things that we did here in Harrisburg was pull some of our community members in. Because we are a recovery district in receivership, we have what's called an Act 141 committee. And so I reached out to members on that committee, as well as our school board, some teachers in our classrooms, our instructional coaches, as well as building principals. And we spent a day doing a strategy session that really centered around being in our classrooms across all levels in the district, and really observing instruction, and just getting a sense of what that looks like, because we do have a strong community backing for our district. And in order to set the direction in what we in where we want to go, it's really important that we all have the same understanding and can center around what that means. And so that's where we started when we talked about feedback and observation loops from the district level, to be able to look at what is our understanding of what instruction looks like in our district. And then the next step around that is, where do we now want to go? Knowing and understanding where we have to go in our recovery goals, school improvement, our strategic plan, and how all of those things are aligned. And then take that down to another level where, my team, academic services, we do learning walks once a quarter, and that's everyone on my team, included with the school's instructional leadership team, to now walk through classrooms and center on our understanding around instruction, actually what's the impact of the professional learning that we've done in the district around the goals and the initiatives of our strategic direction, as well as talk about feedback and what that might look like for a school-wide trend or a grade level trend, or even specific teachers that may be new or veteran. And then the next step of that, really centering around school leaders and them and what they do with their school level team in terms of the observation and feedback loop. So I think one of those things is key is that data piece that Sean talked about, looking at that from the standpoint of performance, as well as what we're observing. So both qualitative and quantitative data really helps us to center in on pieces around like what we're seeing, what's our understanding of what we're seeing, are we all in the same area, what are the conditions that we set, and how do we use that information to determine what happens next. So really taking it from three levels. One, setting the tone by modeling high expectations from the district level, and then bringing that down, community and district, then building level, and then ensuring that those feedback loops stay open and constant across all levels.
So I'm going to adapt a question based on what I'm listening to. So, I think it's interesting because one of the things that I mentioned is that the research shows that when we have strong instructional leadership in play in our building principles in place with our building principles, we have better working conditions, we have better teacher retention. Can we talk a little bit about that and kind of address the elephant in the room as organizational leaders, whether we're in a school district or an organization like mine, right? There's this balance between accountability and support, right? And so you've all talked about modeling. Can we dig into this a little further into maybe some of this softer piece of this, right? The climate. How do you, as central office leaders, establish an environment in which we can have the strong accountability, but also make sure that you're navigating your reality, right? Which are staffing shortages. And so can we just talk about that a little bit, because I'm sure that's top of mind for our audience right now. Sean, I know you and I have had lengthy phone conversations about this very topic. But if one of you is kind of ready to jump into this, I would love to explore this a little bit right now.
I can jump in first because it's a tough space for us, especially because we have a recovery plan, which means that our state education agency is always looking at how we're moving towards our goals, what's the progress, and we're always in a sense of urgency to ensure, because ultimately we want to get out of receivership. And so for us to be able to do that, we have to meet or at least have progress and build confidence that we've set the systems in place to be able to move towards or meet the goals that have been identified for us that we've got into receivership. I think one of the biggest things that we work really hard at is when we go back to talking about setting those conditions, really making it a safe space. And I think Jerry may have said this, I'm not sure which one, that not all instructional leaders or not all school leaders are ready to take on the instructional leadership aspect of the job, but it's a space where we must be. So some of the things that we do when we initiate conversations is we try to use spaces that don't look at our data, right? And so when we want to open up conversations, I find data from like districts or other spaces that may have similar or same challenges. And when we open that up at our monthly principals meetings to talk about and align it to maybe what some of our challenges challenges are, it creates a safe space for our school leaders to really want to talk about the data without feeling like fingers are pointing back at them for what their data is, because we know it's public and it's seen. But just creating a space, one thing it does is not feel like they have to shrink back, but two, helps to build confidence to talk about someone else's data that prompts questions, discussions, and areas. It also gives us the opportunity, and when I say us at the district level, my team, the opportunity to take note around what's being discussed, what's said, so we can identify what may be some areas that we need to support our building leaders. So we have this service and support mantra that the district really tries to focus on, and we really try to differentiate that. We drive it by the data. When we do have those one-on-one conversations, but we work really hard initially to introduce something that may not be our three fingers pointing back at us, but it opens the floor for principals or school leaders to feel comfortable enough to start a conversation, to identify wonderings, to talk about, ideas or potential things they would do. And then we take that to the next level and compare it and talk specifically about their data. So that's just one of the ways that we try to open the door of accountability. Is not starting with, here's your data, what are we doing about it? But getting them comfortable with looking at similar or like data. And they do give us feedback that they appreciate the ability to do that, because it doesn't put them in an automatic space of being on the defensive right away.
So I could jump in. So I think there's a lot of great details of what we focus on the ground, and Portia hit a lot of those. So maybe I'll jump up a couple thousand feet, because frankly, to me, and Layla, I have hours of content on this, but I can get it down in just a couple minutes. The greatest strategic challenge, I think, facing public school districts right now is a teacher shortage. And we are in a very different relationship with our employees. And so this idea, I think of a needle that going between accountability and support. The districts that are going to achieve and succeed, I think, are going to be the ones who find a better way to lean into support and are much more deliberate and targeted in the way they support their teachers and put accountability kind of in sort of the right lens. That it still has to be there, but we really need to think about support. Now, a phenomenon that struck Harford County, which many others, and I'm sure my colleagues here can share a little bit about this, is in 2018, when I arrived, we have about 3,000 teachers in our district. At the time, we had fewer than 20 working in our schools who were not fully certified as teachers. Now, in 2024, I have more than 200. So the number of teachers who I have who need a great deal of support, in order for me to sustain any academic achievements and sustain this sense of, instructional skill, I have to think really carefully about how I'm supporting those teachers that I'm dealing with. Because when you bring in people who aren't fully certified, obviously they haven't had the training. They're usually really sharp. They're bringing a lot of content from other fields. But you got to think about, what did we roll out last year? What did we roll out the year before? We have most of our staff completely up to speed on those things that we've rolled out in the past, but we got to catch these folks up. We got to find time to make sure that they're on the same page with these instructional initiatives that we've been rolling for multiple years. So we have to kind of go back and revisit. We have to create circumstances where they're getting the support they need to be stronger teachers, because many times when you're bringing in people who aren't fully certified, they may have good content knowledge, but they don't necessarily bring the classroom management, and you can't get to great instruction if you can't get the class under control. And so we're kind of operating on this level, and I always look at it through, how are we addressing the teacher shortage? So our district looks different now from how it did in 2018 when I arrived. We've had to put a lot of supports back in place for teachers. So we have more coaches, we have more instructional specialists. And in fact, one of the things I've been talking about in the district as we look at potential budget changes is sort of pushing a quality over quantity approach. That I need to make sure I'm constantly pushing for stronger teachers, and those who I do have, I have to be thinking about how I keep the resources and the infrastructure in place to support them so that we can get to this level of instructional quality that we want. And then the one other thing I didn't go as deep into, but mentioned in my introduction, is the work I'm doing on teacher preparation. We're reaching out not just, I mean, we don't have a university in Harford County. We have a community college. We have an amazing relationship with them. We're doing Teachers Academy program. We have an early college for teachers that will have its first seniors this year. We've done a lot of things to grow our pathways into teaching, starting as early as, middle school when we're recruiting them to go into these programs, and also reaching out to bring universities in to work with us in we're calling it a model school, but it was built on a lab school approach. And so everything we're doing to create all these different entryways into the field of teaching so that we're able to control a little bit of the quality that's coming in and hopefully over time reduce our reliance on non-certified teachers. But so for us, it's, dealing with the realities of those challenges that are facing all of us in the country and thinking about how I can bring that quality in, and then getting to the level, and then kind of getting to the details that Portia's talking about of, here's what we do day to day when we're talking to people. So I'll stop there, but as you know, I could keep on rolling on this topic.
I just want to, jump off from what Sean just called out. We are dealing with, a different situation with our teachers, just as far as mindset. The needs seem to be different, and we do have many teachers in our district that come to us from non-traditional pathways into the classroom. So the idea of support, and we have to rethink that and continue to rethink that, and really listen to our teachers. Be very intentional, of course, but pay attention to all those initiatives that we have had and that we are even contemplating to implement. So, starting with the needs of our teachers, it always makes sense, because they're the ones that work with our students every day, and the students' needs really can't be met if we're not meeting the teachers' needs. So, it is an ongoing cycle, and we just have to be tooled very well at the district to be very attentive, responsive, and ensure those folks like our principals that are working with teachers every day, that we all have the same viewpoint as far as what good instruction looks like, and what tools and resources are needed to ensure that good instruction. So, but it does start with people. That we are in our business. It's all about people, whether it's our students or families, and then those that are doing the work directly with our students are teachers. So supports are critical, and they have to align to the needs of the teachers, but at the same time align to the goals of the district. And we all want our students to have the opportunity to be successful and strive at the highest level. But we have to set the vision and make sure that the foundation and platform's there for everyone to reach that.
So Jerry, I'm going to jump down to sharing areas in which you're thinking about improvement. I'm curious, when you were introducing yourself, you highlighted collaboration, which is something we see in the research, right? That you have to make sure that it's a collaborative environment, and that starts at the top in any organization. Can you share a little bit about how you focus on collaboration and how you support collaboration in your system?
Well, it's already been highlighted. It's really about creating that environment that it's safe. Especially modeling the vulnerability. So beginning with me, with our leadership team, our district leadership team, our principals, and so on, I have to model that vulnerability. I have to be able to point out and discuss areas of weakness in my case, my leadership skills and what I'm working on to improve areas within the district where we just all know that we have many opportunities to improve, and we just have to be honest with one another. So that trust has to be built, and it starts with being vulnerable and being open and honest, and then allowing people to learn how, because we're all, when you go into a leadership role, many people's expectations make it to be that you should not fail. You have no weaknesses. If you show weakness, you're not a good leader. And so we just have to set conditions where people understand, when we come together to learn and support one another, we're going to focus on what our goals are, but we all have to come to the table ready to be honest and vulnerable, and seek solutions together. So building that team is an ongoing process. When we have failures, we just very open and honest about it, and we certainly then gravitate or immediately start looking at, well, what are possible solutions to these failures. So it's really about establishing that culture of trust and vulnerability, and then you have to model that and take that all the way, to your teachers, and even your students. The students need to see that same kind of modeling as well, so that they will take the risks they need to take to learn difficult things. And we have to be willing to do that ourselves before we expect our students to do that.
Portia, can I adjust the question for you? So I also want to be mindful of time. I'm curious, when you think about guiding your instructional leaders and establishing high standards and the practices that you've outlined, do you mind sharing what some of the stumbling blocks have been over the past few years in doing this work? Because I think that's where we can unearth some of those lessons learned, right? What are the pitfalls in this work, and where have you stumbled as an organization?
Sure. I think some of the things that has happened in the feedback that we've received in a number of spaces each year is one, what Jerry spoke about, not having collaborative spaces that were the right collaborative spaces. It's so easy to think that you can pull a committee or pull, certain folks together that's going to get the work done or give you what you need, and really there are voices that are being left out. So I think that's number one, ensuring that we have the right collaborative spaces to give us the feedback, and it's not always the same people, depending on what it is that we need. I think just the thing that we've talked about is the human crisis, human capital crisis that we have. Prior to coming in this role, I was a building principal that lost 21 teachers in mid-year. And so when you think about, I saw you, Jerry, like, wow. So when you think about like what in the world happens when you do that, one of the things that was afforded to me, and which I try to continue in this role, is the ability to be innovative, right? And to talk and collaborate with your staff about how do we address this, because context is important. And understand what's happening within your building or the level, whichever level you work with. So I think that is one of the spaces in which we've been able to kind of address some of the roadblocks, is really ensuring that we understand context from buildings, and we really listen and hear our principals as well as teachers. I did this spring a listening session across the district, across all levels, because we stepped out on the chance of our emergency certified teachers, the number that we have. And we, for this school year, every Wednesday had a 2-hour early dismissal, so we can spend more time around professional learning. And so that was really trying to provide just-in-time supports for the significant number of teachers that we have that are coming without toolboxes, or coming, not through traditional teaching prep programs. And it came to me in one of our professional developments where one of the teachers looked at me and said, "What is a PD?" And so when you get that level of questioning, it really gives you pause to say, wow, like we're seeing, but we're not necessarily listening and understanding what the true needs are. So I think that was one of the biggest stumbling blocks. And so those listening sessions have really helped us. We're currently working on that. We've asked, and we will do our Wednesdays again next year, but really fortifying those more differentiated to what teachers need. Because as we approach that this year, we didn't have the right collaboration collaboration groups going on. So we felt like we thought we knew what everyone needed, but those listening sessions were really an eye opener. And so that will ensure that we have different committees, different feedbacks, ways that we can honor teacher leadership to help us build capacity across the district. So sometimes when you're under the guides of a recovery plan that gives you a timeline in which things have to be accomplished, it can make you lose focus of the people that are on the boots on the ground doing the work, because you want to be successful and not be underneath. So you have to be mindful that you have to have the right people at the table, and the right collaboration is probably one of our biggest stumbling blocks.
John, Jerry, stumbling blocks that you might be willing to share?
I don't mind going. There's no shortage of stumbling blocks in this work. Gosh, I mean, things changing direction. You know, one thing we've been challenged with is getting the assessments right. You know, at the state level, the state of Maryland has had, I think, 4 different assessments in the last decade or so at the state level. So it's been really hard to get any kind of continuity of data there. We were reading inventory and math inventory district, which of course just went out of business. They were purchased by another assessment company, so we've had to go back. So for us to even create continuity in our data, I mean, assessments have been such a hard thing. You know, we have some places where the data has been consistent, where we've been able to show the gains, but in terms of telling the story and really even knowing if we're making progress against last year, that's been one of our challenges. And some of those challenges, again, were created, or stumbling blocks were created by sort of outside forces as the resources are changing and you know, the tools are suddenly not available any longer. And so that's been a stumbling block. Another stumbling block for us, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but you know, my focus when I came into the district, I saw that we needed a language arts curriculum. We ended up choosing a curriculum for some very, I think, good reasons, but it's a curriculum in elementary school that's gotten a lot of criticism. And we've done quite well with it. In fact, last year we had the 2nd highest language arts growth in the state, despite the pushback we've gotten about our curriculum. And my belief, I could tell that our schools were doing well with it, that our teachers were doing well with it, because I was going into the buildings and seeing what was going on and, you know, constantly checking. But I think the big lesson for me is, you know, when I was superintendent of North Carolina, I remember purchasing a program, but we really didn't have the money at the time to spend on the training we needed to roll that program out well. No matter what you invest in as a school system, or as a, you know, school-based leaders, I know principals get, you know, they have some discretion frequently to invest in things. If you don't have a good plan for how you're going to roll it out, you don't, you know, have a great plan for how the PD is going to come to make that a successful tool. And that's something I referenced earlier. You don't have a plan to ensure that in the next year, and the next year, and the next year, the people who are new to the team, because in some places we see a lot of turnover, that you're bringing people up to speed on it. All of these tools are not going to deliver what you want. And so I think the reason we did well in the language arts, because we were getting a lot of criticism, we were hyper focused on getting it right and making sure our teachers were doing what we needed them to do and knew what they needed to do. And, you know, and just, I think we did a great job with the training and the rollout, but that hasn't been my experience everywhere I've been. And so, I mean, that is one of the big takeaways for me is, you know, don't push anything out there until you know what that plan is to ensure it can be delivered effectively. There's a lot of great products on the market, but most of them will fail if they're not rolled out well. And so we've run into that, and I'd like to say that that's a stumbling block we've learned from, and hopefully we can avoid more often than not in the future.
Jerry?
You know, just we've had our own share of challenges in our state, you know, so things that quite honestly were outside of our control. We have to maintain that mindset that we need to focus on things that we can control, even though it's very frustrating, especially when so much emphasis has and continues to be pushed on, you know, and put on the state accountability, which we're all for accountability. I mean, we want that feedback. We want to see how our students are growing. We want to see the impact we have as educators. But that's just one measure. And then our getting on a routine where we might have stumbled on doing some of our own benchmarking and interim data, uh, and not fully anticipating where our weaknesses are. What I mean by that is we're pushing a lot of data analysis, but then we realize that we have a lot of folks that honestly don't fully understand. They understand the data, but they don't know what to do next. And so that was a stumbling block for us. It has been in the past in a different district as well. I should have known better, but you get involved, and sometimes you do stumble. You just got to pick yourself up. So overcoming the state challenges, overcoming the realities that we have a lot of turnover, that we have to maintain that momentum. We have new people. We have to always remember we've got to keep that cycle going, and tier our supports for people that are in different levels. So we have also stumbled there. We have maybe haven't supported in a differentiated way as well as we should and can. And so we're working on improving our structured professional learning across the district. But those have been our big stumbling blocks, is how to sustain that support and meet the needs of everyone that's at different levels. And at the same time, make sure everyone has the right tools. So you talked about curriculum, Sean, and that's very important. That's been something I've been involved in different capacities. The importance of having that high quality instructional material and ensuring everyone's trained to use it well, and everyone continues to be trained to use it well, is sometimes a misstep by a lot of districts. So we're really trying to make sure we focus on ensuring that our teachers are supported on how to use our tools that we have. You can have the best tools if people aren't trained to use it. If they're not supported to use it well, then it's really not going to have the impact that it should and can.
Okay. Well, this is where I'm going to provide you an opportunity, your 1 minute soundbite of providing advice to other central office leaders out in the world trying to support instructional leadership in their system. So can we do a quick round the room closing remarks, and then I'll close us out with some of the themes that I heard and resources that we're going to be syndicating. So Jerry, since you're off mute.
1 minute soundbite is certainly focus on a collaborative culture where everyone feels safe. I mean, that's been said multiple times, to be a part of the solution. So everyone should be a part of developing the vision, and also understanding the why of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then as a team, support doesn't just fall on one person or one position or few roles. It's everyone. So you just have to make sure you're consistent in your messaging, and that you also accept that people are going to make mistakes, and you want people to take risks, but they need to be focused risks and what the outcome is that the team is looking for. And certainly, most importantly, everything should remain focused on students.
Portia?
Thank you. So one, ensuring that the vision is set and everyone really and truly understands that, ensuring that there is alignment, as I mentioned, specifically for our district, having a recovery plan, a district comprehensive or strategic plan, and then each school having their own school improvement plan with or without a designation according to the state education agency, ensuring that there's alignment amongst and between all of those things. Not only that, but ensuring that everyone understands what that alignment is and the direction that ultimately you're trying to go. One of the things that I neglected to mention was everyone's understanding of the initiatives or the strategies and how they all fit together and that they aren't one siloed or individual thing. So spending a significant amount of time ensuring that people understand what that is can help the motivation as well as building the capacity towards those things. Materials and resources came up, and I cannot the importance of it, especially when we have done our research and identified materials and curricular resources that will give us what we need for our scholars, ensuring that there's an understanding of what those are, how to use them, as well as how to supplement in those spaces if there's a need to. And then I think one of the most important pieces is that side-by-side support, whether that is district leadership side-by-side with building leaders, ensuring that they understand and they're being supported, and building leaders side by side with their teams and their teachers, so that there's understanding, as well as that, like that feedback that has to be substantive in order to move and shift directions of the district.
Sean?
So I guess to summarize where I've been today on this conversation, this has been fantastic. Thank you. I think we have to strategically lean into how we create a support structure in our districts. We have to start there. We have to plan for it. We have to really analyze what that means for us. Then I guess another claim I would make is you can't buy improvement, and you can buy products with great potential, but if you haven't put the work into planning how you're going to do that well, then it won't be a good use of resources. I'd also close, the big picture is we need to create that psychological safety. We need to do it just as much for our staff as we do for our students. We need the clarity on the goals. That's one of the things where, the data helps because it gives them clarity about what's happening, clarity about the expectations of what the leaders can deliver. And if you're having conversations where you're getting on the same page with things, I think you can really see the work start to take off. So I'll stop right there, but I've really enjoyed hearing the insights from my colleagues here, so thank you.
Well, thank you all. I think what I would say to summarize, because Sean, you did a fantastic job summarizing the conversation just now. I want to emphasize a few things that I heard across the three of you, one of which is the need to make sure that whatever it is that you're rolling out and asking your staff to do, that you're being really thoughtful about implementation at the forefront. And that's something we see in our work here at Education Elements. We focus on those implementation efforts and how to ensure that we're implementing well. I also wanted to highlight something that brought Portia to the conversation with us today. We're actively thinking about how you can measure what's happening in the classroom. And I think this group elevated the challenge between either vendors being sunset or state assessments shifting. It can be really hard to get those trend lines, right? And so one of the things that we're doing with Harrisburg that I did want to highlight in this conversation as we close things out is using our 7 C's instructional framework and that measure in how we're gathering student perception of instruction. So, in this era where we're thinking actively about all of the different meaningful ways we can capture student voice, what we're seeing in Harrisburg right now is a really fantastic way to leverage student voice and student perception of instruction and have a research-based framework for talking about instruction, right? Facilitating that dialogue. And while surveys cannot be the end all and be all, I want to be really clear that's not what I'm suggesting, but I do think it's an interesting way to think about how we can mitigate some of these other assessments changing. So what are the different data points that we can collect? And the 7 C's instrument that they're using in Harrisburg is one way that we can do that. And so what I want to pull up on the screen here is some information about that framework and a case study that we did with one of our partners around looking at effective teaching and effective practices over multiple years, because those trend lines can be very difficult to capture. So we're at the top of the next hour. I want to thank Jerry, Portia, and Sean for all of the thought that you put into this conversation, for the vulnerability that you were willing to share in terms of where some of those stumbling blocks have been, and where you all are hoping to take your individual districts. I know our audience is appreciative of all of the insight that you shared, as are we as a team at Education Elements. So I look forward to seeing everybody in our next webinar. And I wish everybody well, and a huge thank you to our panelists.